On today's episode of Locked On Canadiens, we have good news, we have bad news, and we have one ugly hockey game.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to episode 1152 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Doing that supports the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I am Ian Boisvert, also known as @MainBetsIan. I'm joined by the incomparable Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. Laura, a Tuesday should not have the amount of emotions that this Tuesday had. How are you feeling by the end of it?
It's been a roller coaster. I'm not gonna lie. I think the first segment in itself is just a roller coaster as well. There's good, there's bad, there's ugly. But you know what? At the same time, that's what we're here to do. We're here to talk about everything and break it down for all our listeners. And we thank everyone as always because you guys are what keeps us going on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot to cover. I mean, I don't know how we're supposed to cram all this into one episode, but we're going to do our best. We got obviously the game to break down. We have the injury updates on Patty Laine and David Reinbacher. And we have to have a very unfortunate conversation about Arber Xhekaj, but we need to start in chronological order. We will start with our injury updates to our two fallen Canadiens. We'll start with David Reinbacher since that one came out first. Out 5 to 6 months. He had surgery on Tuesday to repair damage to his knee. I mean, just the worst case scenario outcome for him, right? He's going to miss practically the entire year.
Yes. And that's kind of what we were worried about on yesterday's show, right? I think in the case of David Reinbacher, it's less the teams that lose, it's more him that loses because he would have benefited from playing a year. And that's not to say that Laval didn't need him or that he was useless. It's more to say that they'll be able to survive. It's just that he's losing this year of development, which is truly, truly unfortunate. There's hope that he could come back if they are to make a playoff run. I think at the end of the day, though, this is concerning news, but it's not unexpected. We've had a few days to prepare for this, and it's unfortunate that this too, it was a kind of a freak injury more than anything else.
Yeah, I've watched the play that he got hurt on a handful of times, and I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. It's a lot like watching trying to find the play that hurt Kirby Dach last year. Where did this hit happen where he got hurt? What part of him, what part of this collision caused that much damage? And that's why, because of that injury to Dach and because of Laine and Reinbacher as well, every time a Canadian player goes down, I'm staring at them to make sure they get up. It's that kind of. Kirby Dach went around the back of the net. I think he caught a rut in the ice and just ended up Forsberg diving forward and just sliding on his stomach. And I stared at him until he went out of focus, and then I saw him get back in the play because I was like, well, what if it's happening again? Because we're so just broken by the injury history of this team. The greatest goalie in Canadiens history by wins is currently still on the roster, but will never play again because he has knee problems. It's really, really, really tricky. So bummed for Reinbacher, bummed for Laval. The people who go and see a lot of those games, it would have been a lot cooler if Reinbacher was there, but so it goes. Patty Laine, this was the opposite end of that script.
What does it say about the Montreal Canadiens injury history of late that we said only 2 to 3 months with hope and optimism, as opposed to normal reaction, which is, oh no, he's going to be out for 2 to 3 months.
I had the same thought. I said, we are the only fan base who would be happy that a player is out 2 to 3 months because of the context, right? Everything exists within the context that surrounds it. And Patty Laine is out 2 to 3 weeks, or 2 to 3 weeks, I wish, 2-3 months. They said it was a knee sprain. They didn't specify what got sprained. The same with Reinbacher. They didn't specify what was injured. They just said He had surgery on his knee.
The key word is they didn't say tear with Patrick Laine.
Yeah, sprain is like perfect. That's that.
It's the best you could hope for. And that was the thing, because
really
like people were like, best case scenario with the sprain, right? And so this is the best case scenario. And it does mean that, yes, like there's going to be a lot of patience, and I cannot begin to kind of try and speculate how it's going to, you know, how he's going to feel about this. But it's, to me, it's a good sign that he's coming to watch his teammates and feeling like part of the team, because I don't want him to fall into one of those spirals without being able to play. But the good news is there's a possibility that we could see Patrick Laine before the new year, right? Like this season is going to have Patrick Laine play. That's what I'm getting from that. And so I feel like, you know, our vibes were immaculate. Our vibes were then a disaster. I feel like our vibes now can be a little bit more even.
Have you seen the graph that's like, it's so over, we're so back, just going up and down? That was Tuesday. Like that was one day for us.
Yeah.
And it's so over, we're so back. And then obviously into the Sens game where all of that happened all at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the Marty St. Louis quotes on Laine before we knew were legitimately heartbreaking in the most like wholesome way. You know, he was saying our one job with Patty was to bring him in and make him excited to come to the rink again. And we did that. And this is just something that happens. I was like, man, Marty, please don't do this. I'm at work. You can't make me cry at my desk. That's not fair. So, you know, like, I'm glad that they feel like they've put him in a good position. And I think Patty Laine might agree with that. I, you know, wouldn't know, but he posted on Instagram after the announcement went out. He said 92 will be back, and it was a picture of him on crutches in front of a private jet. So that was pretty cool. I mean, just a flex in and of itself. Just like, yeah, I sprained my knee. Also, I ride private jets. It's the ultimate flex. What do you think this, you know, does for the confidence of the Montreal Canadiens that are still here? Like, do you think having him come back and not have a full season lost for him, does that give them a boost now, just mentally knowing he'll be back?
Yes, I think so. And it's not necessarily the fact that they know he'll be back, but it's the fact that they experienced this exact same thing around the same time last season and the result was different, right? I know that Kirby Dach wasn't a new injection to the lineup, but he was a relatively new injection into the lineup that was, you know, gelling with other players, that was making a lot of them better, that people enjoyed playing with and were excited about playing with. And then this happened, and it was like, it was the beginning of a whole bunch of stuff, right? So for me, it's more that mental trauma that they have from having to experience this every single year. I feel like that's going to give them a little bit of a boost, is that it's not the same story over and over and over again. Like, these guys are professionals. They know injuries are part of this job, part of this profession that they've chosen. But at the same time, it is a bit much to experience them to such a level so often, like especially in a short amount of time, right? Like, we're talking 3 years of just massive freak injuries all the time. So I do think that this kind of will give them a little bit of a boost of confidence, but it also inspires them, right? Like, let's hold the fort until he comes back. Let's try our best to keep ourselves in the conversation until he comes back and he can make an impact, right? Like, I think for me, like, if I'm the Montreal Canadiens, the rallying message that I'm, you know, putting out there in the dressing room, or if I'm the coaching staff or whatever, is just hold down the fort. Don't be out of the conversation by November. Stay in the conversation. Keep playing as many meaningful games as you can. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in our second segment. But it's really, really important for them to hold on. And I think this gives them a reason to do so, right? Like, he's seen as a reward. That reward is still coming. It's just going to take a little bit longer.
Really quick, before we jump into our second segment, we've now seen another game of Kirby Dach without Patty Laine. Do you have a better feeling for who you would want next to Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook after these games?
Well, I mean, given that he's like dropping the fists now, dropping the gloves. Sorry, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I don't know. Like, is he going to be playing on the fourth line now and just being like an enforcer? Like,
I will say, in that game, I really did like Armia next to him. I think that might be a good fit. Certainly, I think better than Josh Anderson being there. I don't know if you agree.
I absolutely agree with that. I'm still holding out hope that it's Joshua Waugh, but
Same.
I do think that Army is an option, and it's a great way to kind of alternate Waugh and Armia, and just give the Canadians options, and also just give them different assignments to see, where's Waugh the best, and like can Armia like cut it on the second line instead of the third line? Is he better used on the second line instead of the third line?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see more of that, probably on our last preseason game and into the start of the regular season. But we need to wrap on the first segment there. We need to get ready to talk about everything that happened in Tuesday's game against Ottawa. And we're going to get into all that in just a minute. I love being in the middle of the action, whether that's taking in a concert or enjoying a night at the ballpark. It's just more fun being there. Gametime actually helped a friend of mine this week. He wanted to get tickets to the opening game of the Orioles postseason. And I told him the best place to get the tickets he wanted is Gametime. We're big fans of Gametime here, thanks to their all-in pricing. This is a setting in the app that you can toggle on, so Gametime tells you exactly how much you'll be paying to get in. No hidden fees. Plus, with their seat views, you know what kind of action you'll be able to see. And with their lowest price guarantee, you know you're getting the best deal for your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime. All right, we are back. Before we jump back in, I do want to thank you for making Locked On Canadiens your first listen of the day, and suggest that your second listen of the day be the Locked On NHL podcast. It provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, Laura, I'm going to give you a date. And I want to know, does the date of June 14th have any significance to you?
Was that the day the Stanley Cup Finals ended? Was that the day of a signing or a trade?
Unless maybe I read the calendar wrong. I should go back and look. But
June 14. It's Bastille Day, isn't it? No, that's Juillet. That's July 14th.
Let me see if I got this right. Yeah, June 19th. Sorry, June 19th, 2024. The Canadiens announced their preseason schedule, and that was the day that we knew that Tuesday's game was going to be absolutely bananas. We knew that from the moment we were told it was happening, that all of this was not going to be a hockey game, and it wasn't. It was, we can get into all of it. It obviously starts with Ridley Greig, who I don't think is a particularly dirty player. I think he likes to throw rocks at hornets' nests.
Yes.
That's the kind of guy he is.
I feel like he's there to be a pest, right? Like that's his job is not enforcer, it's pest.
Yeah, the kind of guy that you hate to play against, but you would kind of love to have on your team. One, because he'd annoy other people, and two, because he probably wouldn't annoy you. He lines up Kirby Dach.
I'm sure Sens fans aren't annoyed by him right now.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. He lines up Kirby Dach just inside the blue line. Kirby Dach was engaged with another player. He had already moved the puck. He gets hit up high. It's not a headshot, at least from the first angle. There are some thoughts that maybe the left glove came around and popped Kirby in the face, but I didn't see that, so I'm not going to say it happened. That was something floated on the intermission report. Kirby Dach goes down, leaves for the rest of the period. He does end up coming back. They do not call this a penalty originally, and then they get together and they call it a major so that they can go and review it, which is one of the silliest mechanisms that we have in the NHL for getting penalties right, but so it goes. Like they used it. And then after that, it just became a retribution fest. It was just a bunch of guys taking shots, taking liberties, trying to even the score until there was practically nobody left for Ottawa, and Montreal had lost Kirby Dach at the end to a 10-minute misconduct. Why do we keep doing this?
Do you mean playing the Ottawa Senators or playing preseason games? Because I would like
explicitly
a break from both. What's really interesting is that on yesterday's episode, I was like, I hope these lineups are as close to opening night as possible because I would like there to be a game and not shenanigans. And that didn't last very long, did it? it's the same story with every Ottawa Senators Montreal Canadiens game. These guys can't help themselves. Like, that hate is real. And like, to me, I feel like that, let's start with Ridley Greig's hit. I don't think it was dirty. I think it was
No,
irresponsible. I think it was
absolutely.
late. I think it was
Time and place.
irresponsible. Yeah,
There's a time and
exactly.
place for a play like that, and it's certainly not in the preseason.
Yeah,
I know Sens fans will disagree with that, but there's just like, you know, people like to say, "Oh, he's out there making a name for himself." Everybody already knows who this guy is. He's not
exactly.
doing that. He's not trying
Like,
to make a team. So what it comes down to is he's just trying to hurt a guy, right? Like, he's just
yeah,
deciding, I want to inflict, not injure, but I want to inflict pain on this person. Not
yeah,
necessarily kick them out of the game, but
yeah.
I want them to know I'm here. There's no
It's like
place
it's
for that in a preseason game.
right. It's what, like, old school hockey analysis calls finishing your checks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what
Yeah.
they mean. Like, and that's what he's doing. And I don't necessarily disagree that that's his role. Like, that's the kind of thing he does. That's what he brings to the game. Like you said, though, you got to pick a time and a place, and that's the issue I had. And I'm not too mad about it. You know, I feel like we've had so much anger over the last couple of days that this was just kind of like, you know, as long as Kirby Doc isn't hurt. And then he came back, so I was like, fine with it. You know, it
Yeah.
was a late hit. I didn't think it was dirty. I didn't think he was like chasing him around the ice trying to injure him. Not at
No.
all.
I didn't think it rose to the merit of a major, so I'm glad they used that mechanism correctly, right? Like, that's fine. But by the same token, and we're going to talk more about Arber Xhekaj in our last segment, but like, Arber's didn't look all that different from the hit that Grieg threw. I think the difference is, again, time and place. The game had been escalated so far to a point where that hit is even less acceptable than it was in the first period, right? I think, like, you know, there are some people, oh, I can't believe he got kicked out of the game. I can. Do you know who it was? That was Arber Xhekaj. He just got kicked out of the last one too. Like,
and who
I
he
don't,
hit also matters. It's
yeah,
important that who he hit was like the central player on this team, right? Like, their top line setter.
yep. And he
It
didn't
matters.
return. He didn't
Yeah,
return to the game, nor did Brady Tkachuk, who then got in a fight with Xhekaj afterwards. So neither of them
yeah,
came back. Thomas Chabot also got hurt. I didn't see how that happened, but he left and didn't come back for precautionary reasons. So hopefully, not too much is going to keep him from playing there. I hope
yeah,
we see him, you know, at the last preseason game, or maybe not, just rest him up for the regular season. Honestly, at the rate these are
yeah.
going.
And the same with Kachuk. It's just like with Tim Stützle's, it looked a lot worse because he got a face full of his stick too, his own stick,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, like, again, that was irresponsible. It was the wrong time, the wrong place. And, like, really, if you were playing a little bit tighter and not like actively trying to do that, then I feel like Stützle would have gotten hurt a lot less,
yeah. I
right?
also think, like, the stick hit him. His own stick hit him. That's why he got hurt. So Xhekaj shouldn't be penalized. Absolutely not.
No,
When guys get
he
boarded,
caused.
and yeah, exactly. When guys get boarded and their visor goes pressed into their face and it cuts their nose, that's their fault. That is the person who applied that hit's fault. If you're
Yes,
applying a hit to a point where a guy's visor is hitting the glass with enough force to cut his nose, that's on you. The same thing here. You know, the stick comes up because Xhekaj, you know, while he didn't get the head, he certainly finished high, right? He pressed
yeah,
up. That's the part about it I liked the least, was I think he didn't hit him in the head because he missed, right? It wasn't, he didn't hit him in the head because he didn't want to. He just missed
yeah,
him. So, like, you know, we're going to talk about Xhekaj more in the final segment,
yeah,
because I think we have I have an axe to grind. I think that's going to be unfortunate. But, you know,
yeah,
the bottom line here, I think for both of these teams, good, they need to stop playing each other in the preseason. These teams make their own schedules. And I wonder, if Buffalo wasn't in Europe right now, if Montreal would have just played Buffalo twice and called it a preseason. But they can't this year because they're not around. So, you know, maybe Montreal will end up in one of those global series games, and we won't have to worry about playing Ottawa because maybe they'll stay home.
Where do you think Montreal will go?
I would love for them to go to Slovakia.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when Philip Mashar is good enough to make the team.
Yeah. When
That'd be
he's
really
there and
cool.
Slav is there, those guys will show up as rock stars. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what these events are for, right? Like they like to pick the key players off of them and, you know, build the whole series around them. But we don't know if that's ever happening. It'd be really cool. Any final parting thoughts on the game before we jump into Xhekaj?
Yeah, you kind of talked about it like yesterday. You talked about it today. That game was won and lost on the Canadian special teams, and they really need to be better. I know, we're gonna have time to talk about it, but like I'm just pointing out that exactly what you predicted yesterday happened today. And as I saw it happen, I was like, Ian's probably tweeting about this right now. And then I checked Twitter, and there you were.
I did.
So that
would have won 3-0 at 5-on-5, and they lost 4-0 on special teams. It's unacceptable.
Yeah,
it's just
they really need to fix it. And it's going to be all season. Like, they could win so many games waiting for Patty Laine to come back if they could just like sort out their special teams.
Yep, completely agree. All right, we're headed into our final segment where we have to have a very unfortunate conversation about Arber Xhekaj. We're going to jump into all that in just a moment. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Maybe you like the Falcons on Thursday Night Football at -120, or maybe you've got your eye on the MLB playoffs and think the Brewers can come back at +260 to take their series against the Mets. Well, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I'll say that one more time. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. All right, final segment here, Laura. We're in the home stretch. We have to have a very unfortunate conversation about one Arber Xhekaj. We needed to see more of him in two different respects in this preseason. We needed to see him give more, and we needed to see him play more. He did neither of those things. And I think the time has run out on him, at least to start the season in Montreal. There is no justification to potentially sending down Struble to keep Xhekaj in this lineup, especially because he's gonna get suspended for at least a couple games. And I do want to point out Montreal's opening schedule. They have Toronto, the very next night, Boston, and then Ottawa. You cannot have Arber Xhekaj in any of those games. He has proven incapable to handle those moments at this current time. I don't know if I'm being reactionary, but I just feel like I'm done. I'm done with watching this sideshow every night.
I agree with you. And I think it's really important, though, to point out that both of us are really strong fans of Arber Xhekaj when he's on his game.
Absolutely.
I absolutely adore him. But, since before he made the team, we always said this. Like, Scott was always preaching this, and he was always getting in trouble for saying that. Like, people were always disagreeing with him. Nobody ever said that Arber Xhekaj was just a goon or anything like that. But we always said that he has a lot of skill. He's able to legitimately play hockey, and getting lost in the violence is what ends up hurting him. It hurt him in juniors, and it's hurting him now as he's like, I want to call him an NHLer, but at this point, I don't think that he's going to start the season in the NHL. And it's just, he ends up losing his head and going and trying to do these things. And I feel like it kind of like the violence begets more violence. And he's not learning that lesson. Like, he's not understanding that he needs to rein that in and just play, because it's sometimes it's mutually exclusive. And a lot of the times I'm finding with Arber Xhekaj, especially in the last 2 seasons, right? Like, he showed up a couple of seasons ago and he was able to balance it out almost perfectly. And then last year, we didn't love it. Then there was injury. There was a Laval stint, et cetera, et cetera. He came back and it was okay at the end of the year. And then this year, it's kind of like he's reverting to those bad habits. And I don't understand why he can't just keep his composure, and why he can't just like that hit, you were saying like it was high because he might have been aiming for the head. Why are you doing that, Arber Xhekaj? It is the preseason. And I get that you hate the Ottawa Senators. I hate them too. I completely agree with you there.
That comes by default. Every player who put on that Canadiens jersey tonight hates the Ottawa Senators, and the opposite is true as well. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what makes this rivalry fun at times.
Exactly.
Tonight was not a moment where it was fun.
No, absolutely not. And in particular with Arber Xhekaj, like, to me, it's the fact that the part of him that can rein that in and separate the moments and compartmentalize and like focus on the hockey part, the fact that he's not able to still do that his third season in the NHL, that maturity level that's missing, like that's what's concerning to me. And that's something that this organization really needs to get through to him on that point.
Yeah, because like let's not parse words here. He cost the Montreal Canadiens this game, right? Like before the Ottawa Senators got that 5-minute power play, they had nothing going. And they scored 3 times on that major penalty and took the lead and never looked back. Like they ended up getting one more on the power play in the third period, but Montreal scored 3 times at 5-on-5.
Yeah.
And it was for nothing, which is, again, like we talk about, we win games at 5-on-5, you lose them on special teams. This one doesn't matter, but the one against Toronto and onward will matter. And it's important that they aren't in situations where they're unable to come back in games, because this guy has put them down, not only a man for 5 minutes, but a defenseman the rest of the game. He didn't play. He's collected a paycheck for 1 period. Like it's kind of nuts what we're watching. He barely played any time this preseason because he spent the entire time getting kicked out of games.
Right. And that's the thing too. It's that you're not just taking a penalty, you're actively, like it's like in soccer, like it's like getting a red card in soccer. And like to me, it's just so ill-advised. And the fact that he can't rein that in, or he can't make the right decisions in those moments, that's the part. He either can't or he's refusing to. They need to figure it out. And then if he can't, like that's the part that's concerning to me, because you really need to be smarter if you're going to stay in the NHL.
Yeah. And, we've seen, bouts of him playing well. We've last year, I thought he did a pretty decent job controlling that aspect of him, right?
After he came back from Laval, though.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
We're voicing the same concerns in the preseason last year.
And the Canadiens used sending him to Laval as a mechanism to send a message. Like, I feel like we might find out tonight that he got sent down to Laval. Honestly, they might just decide, hey, we're frustrated. You need to go. Like, you need to go somewhere else right now.
And then, so if they do that, though, like if he gets called up, if he gets suspended, if he gets called up, he has to serve out that suspension before he can play, right?
Yes, he can. I do not believe he can serve that suspension at the AHL level. I believe if he sent down, when he comes back up, he has to sit for a couple games. So I almost wonder if they just keep him up and scratch him the first couple games and then send him down. Honestly, he's waiver exempt. That's becoming a rarer commodity for the Canadiens on defense. So he really needed to make a stand and make a name for himself, other than all of this dangerous stuff he's been pulling. But I hope that the message gets to him that this can't be a reality moving forward, because his NHL career will not advance beyond what it is now if he doesn't do that.
And he does have the potential, and he really does. Like back before, they signed him, like people were talking about he deserves $3 million a year. We're not having that conversation right now. But I will say one thing, though, is that Jayden Struble really, I think, to me, did the opposite. He showed so much poise and maturity and calm. And what he's saying to me is last year wasn't just a flash in the pan. Yeah.
He rose to the occasion, and he took a hit on, was it Grieg? Did he hit Grieg as well? It was maybe a touch late, but it certainly wasn't it wasn't as late as the Doc hit, and it wasn't as late as the Xhekaj hit, and it wasn't as dangerous as those hits. He hit him low. And like Kirby Doc, he squared his bill at the end of the night too. So, Arber needs to find a way to do this within, not the rules, because fighting is obviously against the rules, and we all know that, but the code of conduct that these guys have on the ice. You can't be jumping guys anymore. We need to be done with this. All right. And we need to be done with this conversation because we have trivia, and then we're going to head out of here. I'll remind folks of the question from last episode. Name the player: Montreal, Columbus, Atlanta/Winnipeg, Carolina, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Ottawa. Laura, you got this right at the end of or after our episode went up. Who is this?
It is Ron Hollywood Hainsey.
It is. You reminded me that, like, because I gave you a hint, which was that, the Montreal to Columbus is the key for me. But then you obviously reminded me that he was a big part of the Thrashers when they were around. So I should have, I also love with him, the first time he made the playoffs was with Pittsburgh, and he ended up winning a Stanley Cup. That's one of the coolest things of all time.
Yeah.
All right, we got another one. This one, there's only 4 teams here. Name the player. Hartford, New Jersey, Montreal, Ottawa. Hartford, New Jersey, Montreal, Ottawa.
Hartford, New Jersey, Montreal, Ottawa.
Okay. Yeah, as a Connecticut native, I had to throw in the Hartford there. If you get the answer, let us know. Put it in the comments. We'll pin whoever gets it first. Have fun. If you have trivia questions, feel free to send them in to us. We'd be happy to take them. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, head over to the Locked On NHL podcast to see what else is going on around the league. As a reminder, we are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to Locked On Canadiens so you don't miss an episode. You can follow the show on Twitter at LO_Canadiens or email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.